single favorite video game genre of all time. And the RTS is my third favorite video game genre of all time. So what do you get when you mix the two together? You get Mount and Blade. Now, when Mount and Blade first came out, I wasn't really all that interested in it. It looked a bit too complex, and it did not look fun at all. Then, Good Old Games had a sale where it was free. And I decided to download it and give it a shot. And I played the skirmish battles a couple of times, but I didn't really give it that much of a shot. I thought it looked okay, but I didn't really get into it. Then I ended up seeing a live stream of the actual campaign of the game, and well, that's when I finally gave it its due. And I was not disappointed, to say the least. So with that, get your dried fish ready, and let's enter the world of Mount and Blade.
Mount and Blade was developed by Teal Worlds, a Turkish game developer, and published by Paradox Interactive, and first released to retail in 2007 and then to Steam in 2008. One cool thing, at least according to Wikipedia, is the fact that the game initially started as an independent project worked on by the founder of Teal Worlds and his wife. It is always good to see such cooperation. Now today, we're only taking a look at the basic version of Mount and Blade that was released for free on GOG. And well, despite being the most basic of them all, it's got a lot of gameplay going for it. The base combat gameplay for Mount and Blade can take place from either the first or third person perspective. And I love games that do give you the choice, although to be honest, I just stick with the third-person perspective in this game. The camera works rather well, and you never get killed because of it, and you can either fight your foes on foot or on the back of the horse. And you can use a wide variety of realistic weapons, be they missile weapons or bladed ones.
Hence the term Mount and Blade.
Now the big difference between Mount and Blade and other RPG games is the fact that it is not just you going forth and killing all sorts of foes. Rather, this is a game where you form an army to go fight, and this is where the game works a bit like an RTS. And you can give a variety of orders to your men by using the function keys. The only annoying thing about the battle system is the fact that at the start of each battle, your men will immediately Leroy Jenkins in charge, meaning you have to be sure to start mashing the F1 key so that they will hold position and not charge to their deaths. It is still rather funny that your men, no matter where they are on a map, can hear your orders like you have a bloody fantasy radio or something.
This is clearly done to make the game fun. I'm sure there's a mod somewhere that turns the game into Dysentery Simulator 2016.
The game itself starts up with the standard character generator. You choose your name and pick your stats, and you can actually go on to create a one-man army, but really you want to focus on being a good military commander, meaning you want to max that charisma and intelligence, and pick skills that bloody well help in commanding your troops. You can also choose a background, and this will determine your starting money. My suggestion is to choose a background that will give you as much money as possible. Once you have created your character, you are dumped out onto the world map, and the first thing you want to do is go around to the various villages and hire troops for your burgeoning mercenary company. Do not hire too many, though. This game has more realism than most in that your men are not loyal to you, but rather
the Great and Mighty Dollar! Hallowed be his name. Yes, these guys expect to get paid, and if you don't pay them enough, they will eventually leave your company.
Now you pay them each in-game week, so in first starting, try to just hire about 10 men. Now as you complete quests and kill foes, you will gain experience points, and as your men kill foes, they too will gain experience points as well, and you and your men level up over time. Your troops have several upgrade paths. For me, I prefer to use Heavy Cav. These troops historically were the dominant type of troop on the European battlefield for many centuries. They just destroy all. These are the guys who will wreck armies many times their size and take no casualties. In many respects, like real life. But as you would expect, these men must be paid for. So if you want a massive military force of Heavy Cav, you had better find many ways of funding.
This is a game that is very much on the fun side of realistic. It's complex enough that you have to think, but you don't have to micromanage every single bloody detail.
Securing funding can either be difficult or easy depending upon your playstyle. The main meat of the game is just going around the land and killing random weak enemies that will appear. These are, of course, mountain bandits, looters, deserters from armies, and of course sea warriors, aka Vikings. These guys are fucking brutal, as one would expect, But who dares wins, and if you take your military force up against these guys and win, your troops will gain a shitload of XP, and you will get a lot of good loot out of it as well. So you can make good money from just killing enemies and selling their gear, much like in real life, but also like in real life, as your military gets larger and larger and better trained, you'll need a bit more money than dented helmets can provide. So getting the real money requires one of two things. You can fight in arenas,
and unlike in other less realistic productions, in this particular game, the gladiatorial combat is not to the death, which is exactly like in real life. In fact, even in the Roman times, gladiatorial combat was often not to the death, mainly because gladiators were bloody expensive. And in fact, gladiators were often more or less the Roman equivalent to modern-day sports stars. Yes, you could have seen Flavor Flavius trying to sell some sort of special sword.
Fighting in the arena can be a bit boring at times, since to get the money you have to fight a great deal, meaning that you need to focus on ensuring your dude can fight as well as lead. If you win in the arena, you get roughly 3,000 dinars, and this is quite useful for keeping your troops nice and loyal. And what is a dinar, you may ask? It is a historical currency made of silver. Gold was of course used in the Middle Ages, but silver was the primary precious metal. You can also make a lot of money by buying and selling goods.
Yes, this game has a trading component, and while it's not necessarily that boring, well, let's face it, it is boring. But it is the way to make money, like in real life. Essentially, those expensive horse-bound troops, they ain't free. And while those unarmed peasants might be cheap, they get cut down like wheat. So usually you just need to knuckle under and learn how to trade fur.
This is one of those games where it's good to have something else to do while you wait for the boring stuff to be completed. Because when you're doing Medieval Trade Simulator 2016, you are going to be going all over the land selling crap. I find it fun to just read a book as my company slowly crawls across the bloody plains. Now, if only someone invented a bloody steampunk mobile. Now, in addition to paying your troops, you have to provide food for them, too. And it has to be varied food, too. If you just give them bread, their morale can suffer. And if you don't fight a lot, their morale can suffer, too. This is a game that is deeper than just getting on a mount and putting blades through faces. You gotta work to become the top merc of the land. There are also a lot of random quests as well. The various rulers of the land can give you tasks that range from insulting to boring. And you can also help out the peasants of the land as well. They will need you to bring them grain or train them to fight bandits, and if you are really lucky, the village will already be infested with bandits, and you can kill a lot of them for a great XP. The worst and most common peasant quest is the cattle quest.
This one quest is by far the most infamous in the game. Essentially, just about every village requires you to do the fucking cattle quest, and they need you to do it after a couple of in-game weeks, because they always seem to need more fucking cattle.
Moving on from that particular annoyance, the graphics for the game are okay. They are not Crytek Engine 3, but they get the job done, and they're not so ugly as to be distracting. But pretty much any face you create will look like complete crap, and the lands are fairly low resolution. And hell, the overworld has your player character as a sprite. But really, I have no problems with the graphics, and they do their job quite well. And when I played this game the most, I had a very weak emergency graphics card installed, and this is one of the few games that I could play, so I was pleasantly happy with its simplicity. Music for the game is actually pretty good, and is simple fantasy-based classical. That will get burned into your brain until you turn it off and listen to something else. Like, say, Sabaton. Sounds of the game are fairly simplistic. There is no real voice acting, as this is more or less an indie game, and I have no problems with this, as I am more immersed by good text instead of crappy voice acting.
Now on to the story.
The story is as simple as it can be. Go out into the lands of Caldera, the constructed fantasy world, and forge your destiny. The world itself is based upon medieval Europe, with all the factions roughly corresponding to real-life factions. And like in real life, the Swedes are the best faction to use. At least in my opinion. When I played the game, I primarily used Swedian heavy cav. Essentially, this is one of the best examples of an open-world / non-linear game. When you start, you get right into building your army. No going through a scripted intro, the game just starts. And there is no plot railroad either. You can just go around the land killing bandits and helping villagers like a bloody Robin Hood. The story comes in when you decide to help a faction. And even this is non-linear as well, and you cannot just join a kingdom willy-nilly, like certain other games would have you do.
I'm looking at you, Elder Scrolls. How in the name of Telos can a non-magic user become the bloody Archmage?
Before joining a faction, you must first gain enough fame by fighting bandits and doing random crap quests for the various local leaders. Now, you can also help out claimants to the various kingdoms' thrones. I did this once for Swedia and had a great deal of fun with it, mainly because I was the one guiding the story through my actions and not simply following a plot arrow. Now, the main idea of helping a faction is simple. You want your faction to win against all others.
Pretty much like real life, sadly.
And really, that is the story. Join a faction and help them conquer all of Caldera. And how you do this is entirely up to you. And really, that makes this game all the more satisfying. More games do need to focus on giving the player freedom to play as they wish, instead of placing him on the bloody plot railroad. I came up with my own story for my character and why he was doing what he was doing, and with this I had a much more organic gameplay experience with numerous personal gaming moments.
What is a personal gaming moment, you might ask? Well, it's a moment in a game where you do something significant that is completely within the strictures of the game mechanics.
Now, as you would expect from a fairly popular game such as this, numerous mods have been released by enterprising groups of fans. What we have here is the last days of the Third Age of Middle-earth, aka the Lord of the Rings mod, and it's pretty damn well made. So well made that, like so many mods, it could be its own game, and you can play several factions, from Gondor to Mordor. The game mechanics are a bit different as well. Instead of dinars, you trade in scrap metal.
Scrapyard Simulator 2016.
And the scrap metal is traded for requisition points. And each faction has its own type of requisition point, so there is not one universal currency. I find this mod to be fairly well done and rather beautiful at times, but I find it a bit boring as well. You will eventually be swimming in money, but you will have next to no troops, as unit counts for the game are rather low. But the enemy will always have more troops than you, which kind of sucks after a while. One thing to note is that if you play Gondor, their archers are excellent and can even up the various battles. The mod also fixes a few issues inherent with the original Mount and Blade, such as battles ending when you get knocked out. Here, the game continues until all your troops either win or all die.
Overall, I do recommend the last days of the Third Era. It might get boring at times, but it's still fairly enjoyable, and if you're a LOTOR fan, then this is definitely the game you have been waiting for.
Europe 1200 is exactly what it sounds like. It's a mod that turns the game into real life. All the factions are historical, and you use historical weapons. The mod, like the LOTOR mod, fixes a few issues with base Mount and Blade and introduces a few more quest givers. The only issue I have with the new quest givers is the fact that they often want you to go all the way across Europe to complete even the simplest of tasks. The mod is still amazingly fun and well worth downloading.
And so that is Mount and Blade, a game that I highly recommend, especially if you're looking for something a little bit different. And it's definitely one of those games that once you get into it, you can find yourself playing until 3 a.m. And so I am GeneralLotz, wishing you good Mount and Blade with fire and sword, and good Europa Universalis, or whatever makes you happy.
If you enjoyed my review of Mount and Blade, please consider subscribing, and if you can, please consider supporting me on Patreon so that I can continue to bring you these great video game reviews.